So the first story I wanted to look at today was this recent story that came out of CIO Dive covering mainframe usage of all things, and pointing out that even as we are in the era of cloud, that it's we're still seeing a fair amount of mainframe usage and interest in expanding mainframe investment over time. So this study done by ISG Research looks like the spokesperson at ISG is Alex Baker, actually an analyst I know quite well and have known for past decade or so. He does very strong work. And it's very interesting to see how he's taking on mainframe compute and storage, a topic that many of us thought would have disappeared a decade ago.
It's funny. I think I giving up on mainframes about a decade ago. I think that I was definitely in that camp for a very long time. And it falls to me in the category, and we're going to talk more about this in the context of AI in a little bit, but it falls very much in the category of it's all about value. It's all about how do you generate value as an organization, and then how do you align your tech stack to that value, right? And the thing about mainframes is mainframes are incredibly efficient at delivering specific types of workloads very, very well. And for most organizations that have mainframes, it's a sunk cost. They have it. It's sitting there. It's already in their budget. All of those things, a lot of the low-hanging fruit of workloads that were inefficient on mainframes have actually been moved off. And one of the things the article points out, and I know we have to get AI into every story, right? That AI and cloud, obviously both, to a certain extent, because they are pulling away resources on these growth-oriented activities, and because the relative pain of anything running on mainframe is relatively small comparatively based on this, that people aren't putting the energy into migrating workloads off of it. And if I was a CIO today, I think you'd have to really make the case of why I have to get off the mainframe. I think that when I look at the whole grand spectrum of everything, at least for these specific workloads, specifically for these apps that in many cases, I think you mentioned this last week, maybe have been running for literally decades, 20, 30 years they've been running, and it's because the core of the business hasn't changed. It's like, why am I going to go through the pain and suffering of modernizing something just because we feel we should? And to IBM's credit, they've done a really good job of, I think, revitalizing the mainframe collectively, the mainframe brand. They've continued to invest in it. And so, yeah, this article didn't surprise me in the least.
Yes, the only thing, one of the ideas that I've been thinking a lot about recently is the idea that software can be finished. And a lot of the growth of cloud computing is based on the idea that software always has to be iterative, and you're always making these updates, and you're always patching it, and you're always trying to keep up with the Joneses. But the reality is that there are applications and workloads that are basically mature and complete and finished and simply need to be adequately supported on an ongoing basis. And I think one of the challenging parts actually in IT right now is trying to figure out where those application categories lie, because we are so ingrained into that thought process of always having to keep developing, keep updating, and keep being better, when sometimes it's simply about being steady and consistent and making sure you can commoditize and reduce costs over time.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is the change that needs to happen is that we've historically looked at these very monolithically, right? We talked about the mainframe, or we talked about the systems that are running on it. And in fact, I wish I remember their name right now. There's a couple companies out there that I think are doing some really interesting work about what I'll call workload liberation, looking at a mainframe stack as an example and saying, okay, if I break this down as an end-to-end business process, what are the parts that I do need to innovate around, that I need to transform the customer or the employee or the partner experience at some edge, typically, of this business process that may be currently running on the mainframe? And how can I extract those pieces, innovate just that element, and connect it into the backend process that is running just fine on the mainframe and doesn't make any sense to change? And I think that's where we need to get to, is that we need to stop thinking in these sort of monolithic terms and be focusing on workload centricity and using that to guide those conversations. So it's not just that, I'm certainly not saying that just because you have something running on a mainframe, it should stay on a mainframe, right? There may very well be reason, to your point, that we need to move it off. And that goes across any of our legacy systems, any of these big giant behemoths. What